they say that human evolution happened because we have human-like apes in the fossil record, which come from a layer of strata that's supposed to be millions of years old. Standard anthropology puts the split between humans and chimpanzees at around 6 million years ago, beginning with Auroran tugenensis. The fossil skull has no forehead, very large cheekbones, no nose bone, and so it's very obviously just an ape. The big hole, which contains the opening by which the spinal cord can enter into the skull, has been found in ancient primates in the same location as it would be in a human. Some living tree-dwelling primates, such as gibbons, are exclusively bipedal during brief periods they spend on the ground. So if you were a primate that spends maybe half your time on the ground as you do in the trees, then you would have to have habitual bipedal capabilities. Australopithecus afarensis is a primate fossil dated to 3 million years old, and it has no foot fossils except for one, a very tiny one, and when it was studied, it was shown that it is actually very ape-like, and so it would have had a curved, divergent, big toe, enabling it to grasp the tree limbs. So this was also a tree-climbing monkey, even though it had habitually bipedal capabilities, spending half or almost all of its time on the ground instead of in the trees, which wouldn't have actually been likely if it was in the savannah, which at that time would have had 10 times more of the predators than it does today. But the discovery of this little foot fossil, the only known foot fossil we have of the Australopithecus species, he and other paleoanthropologists described the foot as one that did not stake out to the side like a dozen modern chimps, but was curved inward like today's tree-climbing apes. It would have still been divergent, but similar to like gorillas and the great apes instead of the monkeys, and for tree climbing. So it spends a lot of the time on the ground, but it also spends a lot of the time in the trees. And the study authors speculated that Lucy's kind could grasp and climb tree branches with its feet. So we know that it was still a tree-climbing monkey, even though it had these habitually bipedal capabilities. The Laetoli footprint tracks are the only direct observable evidence that we have of the foot fossil, other than the very small one, which has a curved big toe associated with it, with the one of the toe fossils also that we have. We know that it was meant for grasping tree limbs, but the footprints are straight with human toes, indicating that it was perfectly human and would not be assumed to be anything other than a regular human if it were not for the fact that the agenda of human evolution is associated with the tracks and the layer of strata with the Lucy fossils. And based on the archaeological remains of scattered tools dispersing from Africa, these are old primitive tools and cave drawings and stuff that basically stretch from Africa throughout the rest of the world. And with the dating method that they use, they're able to calculate that about 1 million years ago, humans dispersed from Africa. But if human-like apes were in Africa for over 3 million years, and then in the rest of the world for another 1 million years as they dispersed, why would there not be a higher population growth rate? Because we know that since the birth of Christ around 2,000 years ago up till now, the population has grown from 250,000 to over 6 billion. So just from 2 people, you could get 3 billion people in only 1,075 years. With 1 million years, you should have a population growth rate that has exceeded the limit for our capacity to survive according to overpopulation conspiracies. And if you isolate the human population to one region, or even just to a very small number over a large expanse, you have a inbreeding problem to where the mutation rate will increase so rapidly that the reproduction stops because of death and disease and all sorts of problems with the genetics. This problem of inbreeding is not just in humans, it's in animals like cheetahs, which have faced extinction at least 2 times in the past after their populations were reduced, leading to inbreeding, and it's still happening today. The Neanderthals were once distinguished from the humans as being more primitive or having less intellectual capabilities, but we now know that they were perfectly human. There are a large number of cultural habits that distance Homo sapiens from animals. No other organisms, either living or fossil, made tools to make other complex tools, buried their dead, had control use of fire, practiced religious ceremonies, used complex syntax in their spoken grammar, and played musical instruments. Yet we know from their fossils that Neanderthal engaged in all. Humans that live in cold climates, such as Eskimos, are typically larger with shorter arms and legs. Since Neanderthals lived in near Arctic conditions in many cases, one would expect them to have a stocky body build and short extremities. In fact, the limbs of Neanderthals from the warmer climates of Southwest Asia are relatively longer than the limbs of those living in Ice Age Europe. Neanderthal anatomy is essentially human in scope, with the same number of bones as humans, which function in the same manner. However, there are minor differences in robusticity, thickness, and strength. These differences are trivial and can be found on an individual basis in modern living populations. The scientist who initially made the claim that Neanderthals were primitive was convicted by his own university of fraud by making fake drawings to show that the embryos of humans were exactly almost identical to those of all creatures, and that all creatures look the same in the embryo, meaning that we all evolved from a single cell, which is why we all look the same, because we share a common ancestor. But the drawings were shown to be fake, and the real embryos are totally different from one another. The Piltdown Man was a known hoax of taking an orangutan jaw and combining it with a human cranium to make it appear that they had found an evolving human-like ape. The Nebraska Man was constructed from a single tooth dug up by a Nebraskan farmer. Osborne believed that he had the first known hominid in North America, but it was quickly disproven by William King Gregory, who found it was most likely an extinct peccary, and so the whole Nebraska Man was constructed from a pig's tooth. And they also made his wife. So you got to be pretty good with your forensic science to be able to do something like that. But these are just known examples of how Propaganda and lies are used to promote the agenda of human evolution and not scientific facts based on what we can know by testing, observation, and demonstration.